Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our first investor forum for 2021, and we are very grateful that you're here with us. My name is Jennifer Wakefield, and I'm the interim president and CEO of the Greater Richmond Partnership. We are back to hosting these investor forums on a regular basis and look forward to hosting them on a variety of topics for you. Today, we are very pleased to have a panel of experts with us from the banking, publishing, and research fields for an economic outlook of 2021. We'll be hosting Q&A at the end of the discussion, but please put your questions throughout in the Q&A box, not the chat button, and they will be addressed at the end. We are very grateful to our longtime sponsor and investor, Atlantic Union Bank, who is sponsoring today's event, and to Maria Tedesco, the president of Atlantic Union Bank, for moderating today's discussion. Maria, would you like to share a few words with us?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. We're really proud to sponsor GRP's first investor forum of 2021. If you're not familiar with Atlantic Union Bank, I'd like to share just a bit about who we are and what makes us different. We started as a small rural county bank in Virginia in 1902. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you the whole history. Fast forward about 120 years, and today Atlantic Union Bank has grown to become the largest regional bank headquartered in Virginia, with presence across Mid-Atlantic, Maryland, and from Maryland to North Carolina. Even with that growth, we continue to put our customers and clients first, which is really a reflection of our goal to make banking easier for all our clients. Atlantic Union Bank is also committed to enhancing and improving communities where our customers live, work, and play. It's really part of who we are as a company, and one of the reasons we're proud to support the Greater Richmond Partnership. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Maria. This morning, we've invited national industry leaders and experts, many of whom have been great friends to GRP over the years, to discuss the three key areas of focus for GRP: lead generation, marketing, and research. We are pleased to have with us Dr. Chmura, CEO and Chief Economist of Chmura Economics and Analytics, who is nationally known but is based right here in RVA. Dennis Shea, who is the publisher of Area Development Magazine and the organizer of the Area Development Consultants Forum, and Rick Weddle, President and CEO of the Site Selectors Guild.
Hello, Chris, Dennis, Rick. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thanks for joining GRP's investors on this call this morning. As we're at the beginning of a brand new year, some of us are thrilled it's a brand new year. But unfortunately, some of 2020 has spilled over into 2021, especially as COVID cases continue to increase exponentially. But there are bright spots. That's the good news. A recent new ranking from the Foreign Direct Investment Magazine, that's a division of Financial Times, named GRP's strategy for foreign direct investment surrounding transportation and warehousing as number 2 in the world. Also, earlier this month, LinkedIn said Richmond was one of the 15 cities in the US making jobs happen in a stormy time. According to GRP, interest in the region, it has been steadily increasing over the last few months, and there has been a lot of activity throughout the holidays, including site visits from clients looking to bring jobs and investments to the region. So just great news amongst all the other things we have going on. But our first question today is for Chris. How has Richmond fared throughout this pandemic in relation to the rest of the Commonwealth and the U.S. overall? And what is expected going forward?
Thanks, Maria. In terms of employment and unemployment, we fared fairly well, about the same as the U.S. and Virginia. In fact, better than the U.S. in terms of our unemployment rate. The latest shows the U.S. at 6.4%, Richmond at 5% unemployment rate. Virginia a little bit better than that at 4.6. But in general, we follow the same trends that we've been seeing in the U.S. Now, the pandemic caused a lot of uncertainty, and if there's one thing that businesses don't like, it's uncertainty. And so that's one of the reasons why they're considering expanding. They're going to be using site selectors to help them guide into where they should expand to have the most success. Now, when the pandemic occurred, again, that threw a lot of uncertainty into the mix, and a lot of the companies who were considering expanding put those plans on hold until they had a better idea of how the economy was going to shape out. And of course, that started to pick up in the end of 2020. We saw activity start to increase, and again, Richmond benefited from that as well.
Well, that's great. And as you said, most executives don't like to hear that there's uncertainty, but we're excited to hear that most companies are considering business expansion and relocation this past year. They put their plans on hold, at least for the time being, but picking up towards the end of 2020. So looking forward to that. My next question really is for Rick. The Site Selectors Guild conducted research throughout the year to gauge what was happening during the pandemic and just released results of the new study. What can you share with us?
Well, thank you, Maria, for the opportunity for me to be here and be a part of this important update. The Guild, as you know, represents some of the top 50 or so site selectors in the world. And we have, since this pandemic, which now seems like forever, but it's only been since in the last year, we have routinely surveyed our members to get a pulse on what they're hearing from their customers, the corporates doing business. We surveyed them in April, we surveyed in June, and we followed up most recently in December. And the best news, or the good news, is that while only about half of the consultants found that their companies were moving forward with projects in April, that increased to 65% in a June survey, and now over 80% in our December survey are indicating that their projects are going to be moving forward in Q1, Q2, and Q3 of this coming year. So maybe to Chris's point, a little of that uncertainty, maybe the clouds are clearing a little bit, and we're seeing an opportunity for that to go forward. There are really some storm clouds still on the horizon. FDI, and while your comments about the recent study from on foreign direct investment, while that's positive, there's still what we call cautious optimism among consultants on that, meaning it's difficult to do foreign projects right now because you can't travel. We have travel bans in place. One of the kind of sub data sets is that all of our consultants suggest that the vast majority of FDI projects inbound now are with companies that already have a presence, either in the market or in the country. So fewer new projects, more expansion projects in that. And then finally, I would just say one of the things that continues to be a challenge worldwide, but that I think would be good for Richmond, is the workforce issue. While we have, as Chris noted, still too high unemployment rates and surplus labor in lower skill positions, there's still pretty serious skilled labor shortages around the country. And so communities that are able to attract bright and good talent are communities that'll be able to do well in the year ahead.
Well, it does sound optimistic, despite maybe some clouds. So thank you for that, Rick. I appreciate it. Dennis, let's go over to you. I understand Area Development recently wrapped up their annual survey of consultants. What kind of sneak peek can you share with us? And how does that coincide with the result from the Site Selectors Guild?
Well, I think there's some interesting comparisons. We do a little bit of a different measure. Just to give you some background to this, Maria and our guests, we've been doing this survey since 1985, so it's been a long period of time. Let me give you some highlights. Jen asked me to kind of look at that, and although there's some 20, I think we have over 30 questions. We can't do all that right now. So just to give our guests an idea, type of companies that these consultants are working with. And so, we've had over 65 different site consultants respond to the survey as of today. We'll probably get a few others. They represent about 45 different practices around the country, both large and small. But the type of companies they're working with, which is interesting, the top three were manufacturing of durable goods, manufacturing of non-durables, and others. So the two large manufacturing categories. And then the third, not surprising, right behind that is distribution logistics, warehousing. Let's read e-commerce. And then down the list, fourth and fifth, which I think is interesting in Richmond, financial services and data centers. So I think there's a strength there for Richmond in these categories. The type of companies that we're measuring, 36% have over 5,000 employees. The second largest group was 100 to 500. So you go from the very largest down to the mid-sized companies. 28% were among companies. This is who the consultants are working with. And then 1,000 to 5,000, 20%. So there's really the upper edge of companies that these consultants do their work for, which is good because they're usually larger employers. A couple other highlights. This is, I think, a very interesting one considering our times. Our companies considering changing their corporate footprint due to COVID, and 80% said yes. And if they said yes, geographically diversifying was the largest segment. 70% said that's how they're going to change due to COVID. And of those diversifying, 60% will expand, but 53% will contract. So there's going to be activity. They're going to diversify, but at the same time, they're either going to grow or they're going to actually reduce. A couple other quick ones. Remote employees. Now, again, this is only a segment of the projects that they work with. Obviously, floor workers at factories and all don't work remote. I'm sure they would like to, but there's an answer to that with automation. But remote employees, they said that their clients, 75% are having temporary remote operations, but 41% will do it permanently. So that's something to consider about, where they're going to go. They're going to have office space or they're going to be sitting in their basement, one of the two. Opening new facilities, 100%. This is an interesting result. Never saw this in all these years. Of all those who responded, of the consultants, their projects that will be coming up, opening new facilities, 100% said they would have such projects within 2 years. So there's going to be a very robust pipeline. I think Rick referenced this with his study over the next 2 years. Now, we didn't go as far as to say which quarter, but this is what they're looking at amongst their client base. And this is the final thing that I think you all like. The South Atlantic states, we asked where are these projects going to go? North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, South Atlantic, 75%. 75% will be looking in those areas. The only area at the top that is the southern area of Alabama, Florida, Georgia, which is not a surprise. That was 90%. So you got some competition. But then the mid-south of Tennessee, Kentucky, and the surrounding states are 65%. So you're in the middle of a lot of activity. So your neighbors to the west and to the south are really going to be competitors. And I think Richmond is in a very good position to be, part of that process. So that's a sneak peek right now.
Well, it sounds like those are some dramatic changes from your past surveys and really great news for us. I really would love to turn to all of you and ask a question. Oftentimes during a recession, marketing is cut dramatically. And at the same time, I understand the consultants are being inundated from direct outreach by economic development organizations, wanting to Zoom, wanting to meet. This question is to all of you, as I said, in your opinion, what should communities be doing during this time to prepare themselves for success during and post-pandemic? Rick, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Well, I think first and foremost is continue to sharpen the edge on all your product offerings. You have to continue to improve your product. When Dennis said that these companies are going to be looking to do new facilities in the next 2 years, they're going to want to go where they have excellent opportunities for both bottom line profits and top line revenue growth. And that means a good product. Now, having said that, nothing in the world happens until a sale is made. And so marketing is very, very important. And yes, consultants and companies are inundated with contacts right now. So I really think what you should be doing is finding ways to position and promote your offer in channels that reach them in a indirect and passive way. Be attractive, be known for what your strengths are and get that message out. No one's going to sell you like yourself. And so you have to do that. That means put some resources into it and be in the market. The other thing I would say is that be very, very market sensitive. You always have to focus on selling what they're interested in, not what you want to sell. I've been in economic development for 40 odd years. We're all proud of our communities. We all want to pitch what we like about our communities. But if it's not what's in the demand curve of companies, it's just noise right now. So if they're interested in talent and you have talent, then you sing that song and sing all the verses to that song. And finally, then make it easy for companies and consultants to work with you. Make it easy for them to find you, make it easy for them to find information about you, and make it easy for them to engage in relationships with you. In the final analysis, it's a people business based on relationships, connections, and networks. And so that's a long answer to a short question, but I think that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I keep hearing you say it's a sales process and it's about really understanding their needs and meeting their needs and providing them the solutions that they need. So I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you, Rick. Dennis.
I agree with Rick on most of those points, or nearly all of them. So I won't dwell on that. The two things I think that Richmond, as well as all economic development organizations, need to work on is two things. One, we talk about site consultants, and that's a very important group in this industry because they do manage a lot of projects. But when we do our survey, almost consistently year over year, when we do the corporate survey, which is just being concluded now, there's a second part to this, that the respondents will say that 50% say, yes, I will use a professional organization to help us, a consultant, maybe a legal firm, something like that. But there's another 50%, and give or take a couple of points, that don't. So you cannot lose sight of companies that might move out of New York to Virginia or some other location. And how are you going to message those people? How do you do that? And it's not easy. So, we got to. Today, 20, 30 years ago, there was very limited outlets. Today, there's just hundreds. I mean, just look at the internet. So, and we've been working with GRP. They're a client of ours, and we've done some work with them. And Jen, we're always happy to work a little bit more. But you cannot forget the marketplace, because some people are going to walk through the door and want to look at Richmond, or you want to get them to look at Richmond when they might be looking at Raleigh. So you got competitors, and you need to get that messaging out beyond the consultants. Also, really know what your strengths are. I agree with Rick on a lot of those points, but you really need to know what's selling in the marketplace. The survey is going to show us that with consultants, skilled labor is still at the top of the list. Even though we got unemployment, there's still a tough market to fill the jobs that need to be filled in that category. Property and real estate, you have to know what you have. So if someone's coming in, have an answer for them. And then infrastructure is now becoming more and more important, particularly with the logistics and warehouse distribution operations. So, those are three of the top categories. And then finally, I'd say have the answers. If a consultant or a company is coming in and they're asking you about how many chickens are in the neighborhood, don't tell them you got the best horses. You need to answer the question, because you're going to put yourself right out of the contention. And this is what we hear from the consultants through our conferences. What they want to do is get the right answer. So have the right answers and answer it. And if you don't, that's fine, say it, but also give them some other answers that may make it look interesting. So that's my take on it.
That's very helpful. And I'm also hearing, more of a pull-push marketing plan. You can't just do one process. You need to have both outward and inbound reactions too. Thank you. Chris, can we go to you now?
Sure. Thanks, Maria. And this answer won't surprise you at all. You need to use data to tell your story, and it needs to be good data. I mean, just because it's out on the internet doesn't mean that it's good or correct. And both Rick and Dennis talked about talent acquisition and having the talent. So you need to be able to identify, do you have the talent that the industry is looking for to move to your region? And specifically, in terms of occupations, say, machinists or other occupations, and what kind of skills do they have related to different industries? For example, food manufacturer use a machinist differently than an engine turbine plant. So having good information to provide to the expanding firm is very important. And when we've worked with site selectors or expanding firms, they tell us they like to see 50 people employed for every 50 people employed for every one they're looking for, that ratio. So in terms of the occupations needed, we need to be able to show them, yes, we have those occupations here plentiful in Virginia, in Richmond. If we don't, we need to identify occupations where there are transferable skills, or we've got a great pipeline in terms of the academic institutions here in the Richmond area. So we need to look at how many people are graduating from the community college that have machinist skills, or how many people are graduating from VCU or other universities in the region that have the skills that they need. And even the technical schools, the high schools. Are these kids now getting the skills needed so that when they graduate, they can get a job in the region where they graduate?
Very helpful. And again, using data to tell your story with strong factual proof points is always helpful. Thank you, Chris. It's a great reminder to everybody. Let me go to Rick and Dennis now. GRP had worked with local partners to recruit both of your organizations to host events with site location consultants in Richmond during 2020. Both events were scheduled for later times, one hopefully this year, and one in 2022. What good comes when, from having consultants that are able to visit your communities for these events?
Rick, I'll let you go.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Maria. We were pleased to have the opportunity to plan a fall forum of the Guild in Richmond. We didn't cancel that; we just rescheduled it. It'll be in the a little further out on the horizon, but we'll be doing that, and we will be coming back to town. Let me tell you why I think that's important. A number of reasons. One, first of all, no one ever located an industry in a place they didn't visit. So you obviously have to, at some point, with all the virtuality notwithstanding, you have to be there at some point. But I'll pick up on a point that Dennis made and a point that Chris made also about talent. And, it's important to note that skilled talent the data is a static figure. It's what do you have now? That's important because that's what they're going to be buying. But what are you going to do to make it better in the future? And you can really sell that by having consultants and companies into your market to meet with your providers, to meet with people to understand what's Richmond doing to ensure that the talent pipeline will always be there for them in years ahead. Because they're not buying a static one moment in time. They're going to look at a 10-year operating cost pro forma and say, well, how do we know we can staff this facility over the longer period of time? And so I think that's a very important thing. And so being able to bring them into town, elevate their visibility, but to show firsthand the advantages you have to offer and what you're doing to improve those advantages over time.
That makes sense. There's nothing like touching your product and seeing your product, right? Before you purchase. So thank you, Rick. That makes sense. Dennis, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I agree with Rick on all of that. From our standpoint, as an organizer of events, we've done some 75 over the last 15 years in this field. This is our second visit to Richmond. Our first was a couple of years ago. We did a workshop there, and GRP and the person at Jen and her staff did a great job of hosting and making the consultants we invited to speak on the program welcomed into Richmond. And they also extended time to spend with them prior to the event and after the event to show them around the city and what they have in a social way. And I think that's a very good, very positive thing for Richmond to do. It gives them a chance to meet and greet and show them something a little bit more than a hotel. Our second event is coming up in June, we hope. So far, we're going to remain optimistic, But again, we came back to Richmond for two reasons. One, the first was such a good experience, and it was good for those who want to attend from around the country. And to be honest with you, the consultants that we work with, and we work with well over 100 through our programs, wanted to go. That's part of the thing, you know. It's they like to speak and all that, and they like to be up on that stage. But frankly, they were interested in knowing what was happening in Richmond. And I can tell you, after the first one, there was several consultants that I know and were on the program that actually said to me, "Man, it's changed." And that's what you want. You want people to kind of open their eyes while they're in town without beating them over the head with some kind of value proposition. That's later. So it is good. And to have these events there only can help Richmond and Virginia, in their efforts to make themselves attractive. So, yeah, it's a very positive thing. And GRP is, I have to say, not because this is their event, this webinar, but they, in both time, the earlier one and this one, have really extended a hand to us to help make this a good event in the city. And that's a very big positive.
Well, that's great. And I certainly will remain optimistic too that you can have your event.
Yeah, thank you.
That's excellent. Okay, let me have a question actually for all of you. This question is just basically asking, it's always nice to look at best practices. Who's doing this well? So maybe you could share with us who are some of the communities that are positioning themselves well, and what is it that they're doing differently than their peers? Why are they standing out? Rick, do you want me to go to you? How about if we go to you first?
That's a good question. That's always a very, very interesting question. But I think rather than trying to really see, because there's a lot of examples of people who do a few things well. What's really hard to find is someone who does most everything well.
Yes.
And I think that's what I would encourage you to consider as you look at the broad gamut, if you will, of marketing and outreach opportunities. All the blocking, and it's I hate to use a sports metaphor, but on game day, when all your skill positions show up and block well and do well, then you do a lot better job. And so it takes resourcing a program effort over a long period of time consistently to do that. We hear a lot about, let's say, just take for example, you hear a lot about, well, Austin, Texas, it's a big hot market. And people say, well, isn't it great what they did how they're so popular all at once? Well, Austin started their trajectory forward in the 80s, in the 1980s, right? Okay. I had the pleasure of running the Research Triangle Park for a number of years, and people talk about RTP. It's a big competitor of yours. It started in the 50s, and so there's a whole lot. I had an old boss one time that told me one time, said, "Sonny boy, the key to success is find a line and work it." and I think that's what you have to do. Find your niche, find your approach, and work it in a comprehensive way over time, and spend the resources. And those resources are both people and financial.
That's great. Thank you, Rick. And, at least I feel like we have really good product to work from. And, obviously I'm not from here. I have this very strong Boston accent if you haven't picked it up. But I have to say I've been super impressed and love Richmond. So I think we have really good product to work from. Can we, Dennis, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Again, I agree with Rick. It's kind of hard to point at any one place. Everybody has some advantage. Many areas do. Austin being one, which has really changed. Sorry for the noise behind me. I'll give you two though that I think over the years that really impressed me, and they both have the same name: Columbus, Ohio, and Columbus, Indiana. Columbus, Ohio is a mid-sized city. Columbus 2020 has done a tremendous job of marketing and growing their economic development base. And they have a new name now. I forget what it is. I think it's Columbus 3030. I am not quite sure, but they have actually renewed this, and they're moving into their next chapter. And I always kind of use them as an example. The other, Columbus, Indiana, is a small city, but a very, very successful city. When we do our own study about metro areas, MSAs, and over the years that we've been doing it, which I think now is close to 10, Columbus, Indiana always ranks through the metrics that we run these locations through at the top of their class in terms of size of MSA. So there you have a small city. It's not in a major metro. They do a tremendous job. So you may want to look at those. And I think the final two things is, and I agree with you, Maria, on this, but I'm going to add some to it. You have to have the product. Okay, you have to know what the product is, you have to have it, and you have to make it better, better, and better to make it more attractive, like any product. But what you also need in this business is partners. And Richmond has a lot of partners regionally, and then with banks like your own and other companies. If they have a strong partnership, those people will add to the success of the program. And you got to be inclusive. You got to pull them in. You got to make them feel wanted. You need their support, and you also need them to message on their own, because they've got their own conduits. So hopefully that message will be consistent. And if you have strong partnerships, you're probably going to get strong results.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Great product and a great plan is important. Chris, I'll just go to you. Anything you'd add about communities that are positioning themselves well?
Again, I don't have any I could point to, but we certainly work with a lot of communities that do a SWOT analysis or look at what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, opportunities, and then you're able to move off of those and grow from there. And also looking at, and I know Richmond does this as well, looking at some benchmark or peer communities. What are they doing that's causing them to grow? What are the things that we can learn from them so that we can see more growth here?
Very helpful. It's a good way to get your competitive juices going too, in terms of comparing yourself with others. Chris, while I have you, let's ask you the next question. Do you estimate an economic rebound in Richmond this year, or is it more likely for 2022? And based on the data for our market, how can Richmond best position itself going forward?
Okay, so Maria, we were all waiting to see when are we going to have a vaccine that's going to drive activity in the U.S. And now we're looking at when are we going to get to herd immunity? And it's interesting, we've been doing some work at looking at all the numbers coming out, how many people will be vaccinated, and we'll have an article or a blog out on this maybe in a week or two. But in the early results that we're showing is maybe September, October, getting to that 80%. So maybe not soon enough for June, for Dennis's trip here in June. But it's varying by state, and believe it or not, the two top states in terms of getting people immunized are Alaska and West Virginia. Unfortunately, Virginia is toward the bottom, but the governor is saying that there's some noise in our numbers that may put us somewhere near the middle. But in any case, so we're looking to see employment getting back to pre-COVID levels end of this year, early next year, and that's going to vary greatly by industry. Accommodation and food service, tourism, of course, is going to have a much harder time. But looking ahead, given the current industry mix for Richmond, its employment growth rate should be about 0.5% on average over the next 10 years. In the U.S., it's about 0.3, so faster than the U.S. But one of our competitors is Raleigh. Raleigh, 1.6% expected growth, given its industry mix on average. And Raleigh's pretty close to us in terms of employment, 662,000. We've got 656,000. But what are our strengths? The finance industry, clearly we have a big cluster of finance. Raleigh's cluster there is much smaller. Another cluster that we have is professional business services. Lawyers, consulting, engineers are very strong here. But with the move to having manufacturing coming back to the U.S. and especially pharmaceuticals, we economists look at something called a location quotient. So it's employment in the region relative to the U.S. So if you're at 1, your employment is the same percentage. If you're greater than 1, then you have a competitive advantage. You have other industries that will move here more easily because you have the supply chain, you have the training, the workers. So we've got a big chemical cluster, so that's good for us. Raleigh doesn't have any. Pharmaceutical, our location quotient is 0.6, so a little bit less than the U.S. Raleigh's in much better shape, 3. So it's got 3 times as many pharmaceutical firms clustered. So it's going to be harder for us to attract some of those pharmaceutical and manufacturing firms when we're competing with Raleigh. So we'll really have to do a good job here of showing that, as Dennis said, we do have the workers now, but then also, and I think Rick as well, that we have the supply of workers in the future.
Very helpful. Thank you, Chris. Looks like we do have a few questions. So I'll turn it over to you, Jen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. Okay, here's one of the first questions that I have that was sent. Regarding consultant needs and wants, in your opinion, what is RVA missing?
I think every location has something missing, and no place is perfect. It may be, I'll say one thing, you probably need better air connections out of Richmond. I think that's very important. When business travel gets back, I think it's going to be a lot more particular and want to be a little bit more efficient. So second city travel is going to be the less the choice least taken. So if you can encourage your airlines when they get back into business to increase their major connections, that would be good. I think also, Jen, we talked about this, the ability to get to Washington, which is the nearest DC, nearest large city, would be important. I think it would be helpful also in attracting companies because they can get out of that Greater District of Columbia area, particularly now that they have such large tenants on the Virginia side. I mean, those may be some of it. And again, do you have the array of skilled workers that companies are going to want with their projects? So, how do you make that available to them? Rick?
Yeah, I agree with everything Dennis said. I let him go first that time so I could agree with him as opposed to the other way around. Let me make a couple of comments real quickly on that. Because I think that's the question that always people ask, well, what are we missing? What are we missing? Chris made the point. Let's just take the example of life sciences and biosciences. Everyone's talking about it right now because we're in a health crisis and a pandemic. But Chris made the point that here you are, you're competing with Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and it's right down the street, and they've got like a 3.0 location quotient on life sciences, and you have a 0.5 or something or whatever. So what that means is you do not have the critical mass in that area that they have. And what I would say is, well, you want to grow that cluster, you have to understand in economic development that your next best customer almost always looks like your last best customer. And your greatest opportunities will be to build on your current strengths where you have well-developed clusters and advantages, and don't chase after, don't worry about, don't squander resources trying to be something that you're not quite yet ready to be when you have, and leave opportunities that you could really exploit. Proximity to the DC market, very, very important. You can't, no one can compare with you in that. Dennis's comment though about air connectivity, very important, but you're also not that far from some really extraordinary airport. So begin to think of yourselves as part of a regional metroplex, if you will, and you'll see opportunities in that area. But in other words, be what you can be now and be it very well, as opposed to worrying about what's missing. You don't have any fatal flaws. So check that box and work on. I always like to say, when you sell your strengths, you can become excellent. When you focus on only on your deficiencies, the best you can do is become average.
I think that's great advice. Sorry to interrupt, but I keep thinking you got to play off your strengths. It doesn't mean you keep working on your gaps, but you got to play off your strengths. And I think that's wonderful advice from both of you.
And let me make one final comment too, is that don't overlook the obvious as you're going forward. And we're in this huge pandemic, and everyone's talking about life science. They're talking about all this stuff. So I go back to the 1967 movie with Dustin Hoffman, The Graduate, when the father-in-law looked at him and said, "Plastics, son, go into plastics." You know what's selling right now? What's soap and cleansers. In 40 years in this business, I've never targeted soap and cleansers, because it's not really a glamour kind of thing, but yet it's an extraordinary growth market. PP&E, soap and cleansers, things like that for right now are being realigned completely with supply chains and opportunities to get near major markets. I think don't overlook the obvious. Sometimes there's really low-hanging fruit right in front of you. And because we're still chasing yesterday's popular things, we miss those opportunities.
Awesome. That was great. What I do want to hit on is, Dennis, you mentioned the importance of air service, and Rick, you hit on that as well. We're fortunate that JetBlue just extended our first our first direct flights to LAX and to Las Vegas, and added additional flights to Tampa. So that's fantastic. And we've been working very closely with our regional leadership circle to look at how we can recruit more direct air service to this market. And then Rick, you talked about your next best customer looks like your last best customer. And, we're fortunate that, with biosciences and the increasing importance of that right now, we've got, this really standout company called Flow that is created by two geniuses in this market. And they're looking to reshore pharmaceuticals for the entire US. And there's a great amount of funding from the White House. And so things look very positive in that market. So thank you very much for those. I've got a couple more questions I want to get to. One is, there's obviously a big focus on diversity, equity, inclusion all over the US. How can we ensure that RVA is promoting inclusive economic development?
I'll take a cut at that because let me just say, I think this may be one of the defining issues of site location factors in the next few years. The issue of diversity, inclusion is companies are increasingly asking consultants, how do they know they're going to the right place? That's when it comes to those issues, because those issues are going to be big determining factors in an area's ability to attract the brightest and best talent among the younger generations. It's very important. What Dennis, or you can look at Dennis and I and tell that, we're probably not the next generation. We're probably the current, if maybe last generation in that regard. But the younger people, the younger talented people are really focused on these areas, and companies are just having to do that. And so the first thing is have a good dialogue around your existing framework and organizations and entities that are involved in diversity. For example, if a company came to town tomorrow and said, you're used to them asking you where the buildings are and how to talk to your community college and all those things, where your normal. But what if they ask you to organize a briefing among all of the NGOs and nonprofits that are actively involved in diversity and social equity and social justice? Do you have existing relationships with those entities? Do you know them on a first name basis? Are you working with them right now? Well, the answer to that question is should be. The answer to that question is should be. And that's a new thing. That's something that economic developers haven't had to do because it hadn't been a question in the past.
Awesome. Thank you. Here is another question. This one is for you, Dennis. It says, since corporate executives and site location professionals are, for the most part, not really traveling right now in large numbers, what impact will this have on location decisions that were previously planned for 21 and 22?
I can only speak about what I hear, and it's a question I put to the to the consultants that I'm in touch with and who write for the magazine, it's been frustrating for many of them because I know one guy out of Chicago. He did a couple of deals in Kansas City, never touched down there. The only way he got around it is that he knew the property before all this started to happen, and was able to do it remotely. But he was very frustrated because a lot of this stuff is on the ground. I think it's going to be very difficult. They're getting around it. There's more and more I hear, and Rick probably knows this from some of his members that are traveling by car. I know one guy that drove down to Florida and then to look at sites there, and then Georgia, and then back into another one in Chicago. And some are flying, but it's been very difficult. Their companies many companies don't want them doing non-essential travel. So the usual thing that they would do, and these guys are on the road. So everything now is virtual. And at the end of the day, it's all about dirt. And at some point, somebody has to see the property or the building, or and of course, the face-to-face with those people that are going to make decisions on incentives, et cetera. So they have to go to virtual. A lot of times I understand they're doing virtual hearings. So it's very difficult. I don't think it's prevented projects. I just think it slows it down, the process. And we're going to, everybody has to be used to it until such time that we can start getting on those planes again and taking JetBlue to Richmond.
Jennifer, can I build on what Dennis said with that? I agree with him completely on that. Our most recent survey of consultants, 95% of the consultants said that they were reporting a transition to either all virtual or hybrid corporate site selection process. I mean, we can argue about whether it's all going to be that way or not, but that's a huge preponderance of activity. What does that mean? I think it means a number of things. It means you as an economic development organization are going to have to look at your staffing capacity. And when I was in the business full time on your side of the business, I mean, we didn't have anyone that knew how to do drone flying, to do drone tours and those kinds. There's a whole new set of skill sets in being able to present your community in a virtual way. And that's where there's going to be a lot of differentiation. Some are going to be way, way better at doing that than others. The other thing is, and it is going to be a while. Dennis, you're right. A lot of these guys are having to drive as opposed to fly. But maybe you may see times where EDOs for a while will do more of the consultant work for them on behalf of them. So you'll see maybe a much closer integrated partnership with the consultants to be able to do that, because there's a lot of desktop analysis. Ultimately, there will be the boots on the ground, important part of it, but it's mostly going to be a hybrid format at some point in that regard. One other thing that's kind of a nuance in these hybrid formats, used to you'd work with a consultant, you wouldn't see the company until the last visit. Companies now are getting involved in virtual Zoom visits way earlier in partnership with the consultants. So the whole process has been kind of reintegrated, and it'll be interesting. But it's gonna, you're gonna have to learn how to do more things virtually with advanced technologies if you're going to separate yourself from the competition.
And I'll add to that just quickly. I think also this is going to be changing the game going forward, even when we come out of this the pandemic. Some practices that are being instituted now and being done are going to eliminate some of the old practices. And like Rick was saying, drone visits, hybrid virtual visits, different technologies that are being employed now, which were not as much part of the process a few years ago, will now be part of the landscape. And for those economic developers that can keep with the time, so to speak, they'll be ahead of the game when it comes to making those presentations. So in better times.
Awesome. That is super helpful and makes me feel warm fuzzies that we've invested in technology so that we can make sure that our website is as updated as possible, and that we have the advanced analytics so that we can see the companies that are actually coming to our website before they've even reached out. And so, Rick, with your latest research, and it talks about how overwhelming majority of the research is being done on the website, and then they're not even contacting the economic development organizations until you're narrowed down, and let alone if they actually step foot in our market, it's one plus one other community, not even one of a handful of communities like it was previously. So I think that's really important to note. And so what I would like to do now is, Maria, I would like to thank you again and Atlantic Union Bank for hosting and sponsoring today's event. Now, GRP Board Chair and Chesterfield County Supervisor Leslie Haley is going to close out today's event for us. Leslie?
Thank you all. Thank you so much to all the panelists and all of those of you participating. Thank you to Maria and for Atlantic's support of today's event. And hopefully we will look forward to seeing all of you at our next event on March the 25th, where we're going to review the results of the latest perception research with our research firm and other experts on their perceptions of this region. So thanks for this wonderful format for us to gather even in these challenging times, and everybody stay safe and stay connected out there. Thanks for today.